Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I am Vince.
Vince, today's question comes from Kalita321, who asks, should the X-Men really be a part of the Marvel Universe? And then goes on to give us a few points, which we'll read here in a second. Let's just go ahead and start right into it. But before we start reading that stuff, what do you think just of that question, Vince?
I think it's an interesting question to be had. You know, truth be told, I've had the same thought before.
Yeah, me too.
Kalita prefaced this with, maybe it's a weird question. He wrote us a bit of a book here. You know, I'm looking at the question. It's most of the page, single space.
Right.
But, the guy seems to think that the X-Men are so ill-fitted to the rest of a universe that is inhabited by superheroes that there is a question as to whether or not they make the universe make sense. And I kind of agree. I mean, not that I've really ever cared enough to say that Marvel should have done something else, but what do you think, Cap?
Well, I think that the X-Men side of the Marvel Universe doesn't necessarily, by and large, ignore the rest of the universe, but that does happen vice versa.
Yeah.
I'd say that the Marvel Universe very often not only ignores the mutant, X-Men side of the universe, but nearly has to. Because if the entire Marvel Universe was as caught up in the whole mutant debate as the X-Men was, it'd be a really dark and brooding universe most of the time, which Marvel, generally speaking, has not been, especially in the early years of Marvel. So, can you imagine if everybody in the regular Marvel U had the same feelings toward anybody with superpowers or anybody who had a mutation, be it from birth or otherwise, as they do on the X-Men side? I mean, people don't look at Spider-Man the same way they look at, mutants. I mean, sometimes people don't like him because they think that he's that he's not actually a superhero, that he's out for, other reasons besides just being heroic. But you don't hear the same kind of prejudice for the same reasons that you do against people like Beast and Rogue and Wolverine.
It seems to be that the deciding factor is whether or not these people were born with superpowers or whether they acquired them by some means. And as I've seen in the Marvel U, they call them mutates as opposed to mutants. But that's bizarre to me. Growing up, I always thought, Spider-Man has superpowers. Why don't people hate him? Thor has superpowers.
Yeah, and how in the
Why
same
are we going to
universe...
lift Captain America?
Sure, yeah, exactly. I mean, how is it that Captain America's a really good point, and this one I think goes along with it. In the same universe where we hate and despise Magneto, and characters who are born with powers, we not only accept the Fantastic Four, but we know what their secret identities are, and we let them live in this big building, right in the middle of New York, and we just call them when we need something.
It's almost like a statement that's trying to say that people we will congratulate you if you have the ambition enough to acquire these powers of your own means. But if you're born that way, then you're evil because you had no control.
Yeah, except that it's not ambition most of the time, right? Usually it's an accident.
I mean,
nearly always it's an accident. It's an accident with the FF, with Hulk, with Spy. I can't think of a single case in the Marvel Universe where somebody said, I really want some superpowers. I'm going to go get them. Even Rogue's extra superpowers were an accident.
Yeah. Well, Captain America, his were intentional.
That's true.
And that's the one that everybody in the country, or at least in the Marvel Universe, the Americans tend to lift up. Because, here's a guy that he says, I want this. It's almost the American dream, going from something to nothing, or going from something to everything. Listen to what I mean, not what I say. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Happy to.
But Captain America, he's the American dream, starting with nothing and working your way up, being able to create yourself.
That's true. Can you buy then that idea at the same time as people having prejudice against mutants? I have a difficult time with that. Because the reason that people seem to hate mutants in the X-Men is because not really so much that they're born different, just that they are different. Or is it that they're born different? I mean, like what exactly is it that makes humanity on the whole hate mutants? My answer to that would be because there's a lot of them.
Yeah, but that's a good point. See, the thing about it is
all those schisms going against that because people still seem to hate and fear them, and there's only 200 of them left. So take that with a grain of salt.
Well, I'm not actually current on X-Men, so here's a question.
Sure.
In X-Men, are new mutants still being born?
I don't know the answer to that because I've been keeping up only casually. I've read a couple things here and there in the last year. In the last year, I've probably read maybe 6 to 8 X-Men comics total. So I know about. I mean, I know that the whole Utopia thing happened and all that, but I don't really. I'm fuzzy on it. So no, I don't know if new mutants are being born. I don't know the answer to that. We should have invited Shades.
Yeah, a guy who wears shades at night. He seems to know a lot about X-Men. I don't think he could probably read them, but he seems to know a lot about them. It's dark in here. Where'd everybody go?
Vince, let's go ahead and take a look real quick at Khalidah's couple points here, because I don't think we've completely touched on them. The first thing he says is, if for no other reason, because this will take up time. But yeah, I'm kidding. Let's answer his points. His first point is, I think the X-Men franchise already has way too many characters and in a way is a league of its own. We're talking about a universe where probably every 5th person is a mutant. That's 1 and 2. And that's interesting considering that the majority of superheroes in the Marvel Universe who aren't mutants, who aren't in the X-Men aren't mutants. So, like, the whole idea of, if he's right about that, the whole idea that every 5th person is a mutant, it certainly doesn't seem so outside of X-Men continuity.
X-Men continuity...
Unless we just don't know about them.
See, that's what baffles my mind, is that, since there's so many X-Men, or since there are so many mutants, that why should people not judge other superheroes? I mean, that makes no sense to me, and frankly, I have no good rebuttal for it. It just seems like a double standard that they've managed to shove into comic books, like writing Superman and ignoring that he has certain powers so that you can make him vulnerable to another villain.
Yeah,
and, it's just it's conveniency in writing. It's people that are trying to create something and have that hot button issue of intolerance, which I don't think that's ever not going to be a hot button issue. But on top of that, something that's I think worth mentioning, since there are so many X-Men, since there are so many mutants, and since some of them rise to some kind of popularity, you have mutants on teams of non-mutants.
Yeah, so, especially now, but that's been the case for a long time, yeah.
And people are going to show them some sort of intolerance, even within the dynamic of the team. They're going to say, "Oh, well, that's just a mutant, but he's standing next to Captain America and Spider-Man."
Yeah. The next thing he says is, even if you narrow it down to the essential characters, it's still pretty crowded. And then he lists out Professor X, Wolverine, Cyclops, etc., and then says those are just the protagonists. Then if you add the likes of Spider-Man, Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, it gets even more crowded. Not to mention that mostly everything in the Marvel U happens in New York, which is overcrowded in real life. And now imagine it with all those heroes in their respective rogues galleries. And then he says, that's a lot of beef.
Surely this isn't surely it's not limited to New York, because after all, we have Canadian superheroes and we have British superheroes. And if you look at the Marvel U or the Ultimate Marvel U, they seem to have superheroes in every country. So therefore, we tend to just focus all of our interest on this concentrated area of superheroes. And especially with Avengers: The Initiative, I mean, Thor was even in Oklahoma for a while. So I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but there are so many, and it cannot just be that there are this many people in New York. I mean, surely there's loads of them outside of New York.
I think it would be fair to say that that at least just X-Men itself is pretty overblown with a bazillion characters. And I mean the Marvel U is also, but it's just somehow never really bothered me that much. Just the idea of, I like the idea that, okay, the world is too crowded because we created too many characters. It doesn't bother me any more than these characters have this big, long 60, 70 year spanning history, but they only age very slowly. I think it's the same kind of thing, which is why it's just never really bugged me that much. But the idea that it's difficult to imagine people having the same sorts of prejudices against against the X-Men that they do in the same universe that's populated by Spider-Man is difficult to accept. And in fact, he says that in a second point. And I kid you not, I actually hadn't read this entire thing through for a long time before we started this, so I didn't realize that he actually made the same point I did about the FF. But he says the more important reason is that it defies the entire point of the X-Men mythos. The point of the X-Men is that you have mutants and they're discriminated and chased. Well, how can you have that and in the same time have Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, as we mentioned, who are mutants in their own right, but are regarded as heroes from the public in the Marvel U? And I see that's what I'm talking about. I think that most of them, if it were straight X-Men continuity, would be considered mutants, no matter how they got their powers. Because the idea with X-Men seems to be more people fear mutants because they're more powerful than them, and in some places it seems that they spite them because they wish they were that way too. The whole homo superior thing that Magneto's always on about.
I think initially the idea was that these characters were going to face this issue in this book, and Spider-Man was going to face this issue in this book, and it was going to all be, even though somehow related by city, they were still disjointed enough that they could exist in their own universes. And they would do these very comic book things and have them cross on occasion.
That's right. And that was always the Stan Lee method, where it wasn't so much we have this big giant continuity. It was, if it's convenient to cross them or fun to cross them, we'll do so. I mean, I think that Stan Lee's mantra was always, we do certain things because it's fun or it's clever, not so much because we're trying to be, wholly realistic with the universe, but he would try to be wholly realistic with individual characters.
I mean, I think that's part of the reason why we have so many events that just get convoluted and problematic, is because we're trying to fit every character into a universe. And like, for example, I'm gonna reference DC here for an example of something that's just a problem. They had that Search for Kryptonite book that I borrowed from you and thoroughly enjoyed, but they had Firestar bringing Kryptonite to Superman so that Superman could deal with it. And it's Firestorm. The guy can change material into other material. So why did he just change the kryptonite into something that's not kryptonite? And you see, and the point that I'm trying to make here is that when you're trying to include people in a universe, you have to use them in a particular way. Like, if Firestorm were not in that, we wouldn't, that question wouldn't even be feasible. Sure, they're part of the JLA, but we can ignore that guy exists for this story.
That's true, but you've got a really good point there when character, and isn't it weird that they even chose to bring him into that? Like that would be the first question would be what, and I said first question. I actually didn't even think of that, but I don't know enough about Firestorm. It didn't even occur to me that was his power. I mean, I know that now, but like when I read that, I wasn't even thinking about that. But yeah, most people who know their DC really well and know Firestorm would have been like, well, now hold on, that's your power. But if you're really savvy, you might think of it anyway. Like, when you've got a whole bunch of really cosmic characters in a universe, it would be really easy for somebody to read Death of Superman and go, well, now how come every cosmic character and his dog didn't show up to stop Doomsday? You know what I mean?
I mean, Firestorm could have showed up and turned him into something else.
Where were the new gods during that? You know what I mean? Like people would ask questions like, where are the cosmic people that are trying to keep balance in the universe when Superman dies? And the answer to that is, well, if we really want to kill him off, we've got to conveniently ignore some of those people.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, it doesn't really bother me that we can ignore the existence of some characters.
It doesn't me either.
But it really does bother me when they're ignoring the existence of some characters and trying to include everybody else.
Yeah.
So, because then it becomes the question of, well, why didn't you do that? I mean, that's obviously conflict. Like, if this is Superman dealing with a Superman problem, and Guy Gardner and Booster Gold, none of these other guys show up, then that's just soups. I mean, if it's just if it's just Wolverine and Storm and Hoo-Ha dealing with this problem, and Spider-Man doesn't show up, then there's no problem. But and hence the question, does X-Men belong in the Marvel U? And to be perfectly honest, I think X-Men works great in the Marvel U if you go back to the Stan Lee method.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. Where you may question it here and there in certain places, but like when you really throw the whole thing together and make a huge deal out of the prejudice thing with X-Men all the time, but then everything's all together, it's harder to ignore that.
Prejudice being what it is. I used to live in a small town, and I would hear people say like, "Oh, I can't stand." You
used to be a mutant, but you took the clear.
Yeah, that's right. My feet turned back into regular feet, but I saw down all my spikes. I'm no longer Doomsday. But I used to live in a small town, and I would hear people being intolerant on occasion, and they would say things like, "Oh, I hate this group of people." Well, what about Tony? Tony's okay. So. To some extent, I can almost understand what they're going. It's because he's Iron Man. Like, mutants are all evil. I hate all mutants. But what about Bobby? The ice guy. Oh, Bobby's okay. He's one of the good ones. Sure. So I've heard people say things like that before, as ridiculous as that sounds.
Well, it's not though, because if you look at if you look at how the government seems to handle Professor X, a lot of the time that's kind of the case. Where it's like, well, he's got things under control. We don't like mutants, but we make kind of an exception for him. Now, I think that there actually was a long period where nobody actually realized Professor X was a mutant because his power is easy to hide. Yeah. But I think even after they know it, there's a certain reverence people have for Professor X that they don't have for other mutants, regardless of his mutant status.
Yeah, and to some extent, I suppose Professor X, the reason why he's noble is that he doesn't control things. But I don't know. Here's just a thought. We can just let it go.
Except for when he does, because he's also got that whole that whole side where he manipulates things and that created Onslaught and all that.
I wonder if maybe Professor X has maybe he has some sort of unconscious telepathy going on where he's sort of. He talks to a person and he's basically giving them the idea, let me be. And that's just a thought. I mean, he is telepath, or the strongest telepath in the world. What's to say that he doesn't have the power of suggestion?
Would you say, Vince, that as X-Men has continued, like not the early Stan Lee days where it was just the team of five, but I mean, as things have really continued on and the Claremont era and everything like that, wouldn't you say that eventually X-Men got to the point where it was just such a different tone from the rest of the universe? I mean, like other characters kind of have their own tone also, right? But they seem to mesh a little bit better. Like FF's a really lighthearted thing. Spider-Man often is too. Daredevil got really moody and broody and dark with the Frank Miller days. But X-Men is this whole other thing entirely. And people talk all the time about how soap opera it is.
Well, when all of your characters are having to deal with some kind of oppression, then I can't help but think about people. It's going to create a different tone. I mean, it's just a natural form of things. You cannot get away from it. If you have something that's beating your audience over the head, that's going to take over everything.
I got another question for you, Vince, because you're kind of an Ultimate fan.
Yeah.
Would you say that the Ultimate Universe has by and large done a better job of integrating X-Men into the universe?
I would say that, that's difficult because Ultimate X-Men got really, really intolerable after a while.
But I mean, like later on, when X-Men type characters show up in other people's books, like does it feel like it's meshing better?
I think that to some extent, the X-Men show up in other people's books, and people will make this clear double standard because we don't have every superhero under the world in the Ultimate Universe. I guess they're not 100% in the forefront as they are in the regular Marvel U, but the main characters people seem to be like in awe of and a little leery of. They say, "Oh, this guy, Giant Man, Thor. These people are essentially human, but have managed to transcend human limits." and then they look at these other people as if a growing threat. And they what they're saying essentially is that Captain America and Thor, these guys are there to protect us from this growing threat. And essentially what I'm really getting down to here is that no, they really don't handle it any better.
Oh, okay.
It's just they manage to separate wholly. They will include, like Kitty Pryde, for example, has been a big thing in Ultimate Spider-Man.
Well, I was going to ask about that because I just read Ultimate Fallout 3.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I got off asking you that question, because the way the people's attitudes seem to be, by and large, of just superheroes in general in that seem to be kind of the same as it was with mutants in a way.
It's well, the thing about that, even in Ultimate Fallout, which the point of Ultimate Fallout, we're on issue 3 right now. It came out today, but
have you read it yet?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, good. Good. We can talk about it. But which, by the way, I'm sorry. Can I say something really fast for the record? I have never read an Ultimate book before.
Yeah, well,
and I read that, and I really, really, really liked it.
Really?
Yeah, I thought it was
I highly
fantastic.
recommend reading early Ultimate because that's much better than what we're getting now.
Yeah, but just like as a piece, I thought it was really interesting.
It was interesting, and what's interesting about Ultimate Fallout to me is that Spider-Man is a guy who they've killed Spider-Man. We're all sitting at his funeral, and there's loads of people there. He's essentially, here's a guy that everybody really, really likes, or at least post his death have chosen to like, and they're still going to chastise or hunt down mutants. So essentially we have the same problem that we do in the regular Marvel U.
That's not how I saw it, though, because because what Kitty Pryde was talking about was how they chastised Spider-Man the whole time he was alive, but now that he's dead, now he's a hero because dead heroes we can control.
Well, Ultimate Spider-Man is still suffering from some of the same issues that Spider-Man was, which everybody hated Spider-Man largely because of the Bugle.
Right.
And, so we haven't really transcended the problem. Like, people decided that they were going to hate Spider-Man because it was popular to hate Spider-Man.
No, I realized that, but what I liked was that we were getting it from the perspective of a mutant.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I felt like they were transcending it in that way, where they were showing that the problems between the problems Kitty Pryde might be having being a mutant versus the problems Spider-Man was having aren't that different.
Maybe,
and that's the whole reason I brought this up.
Here's a good thought, because I'm still thinking of the Ultimates and people not really reacting poorly.
Well, and I'm basing that whole thing off one issue, which is the reason I asked the question, because I didn't know.
Yeah, but the Ultimates, with the exception of Hulk, the Ultimates seem to be at least partially accepted, and maybe that's because they're government affiliated, they're SHIELD affiliated, and people think that there is some accountability
that the government has control of them.
Yeah,
in some way, shape, or form, and that's what that Ultimate Fallout issue was all about, was control. And I really dug how the three different subplots that had nothing to do with each other all had that running theme of control.
I mean, maybe that is the problem, or maybe that is the essential issue that everybody has with these mutants, is that they're just a bunch of rookies that have this incredibly destructive power, or presumably they have incredibly destructive power, and they go out there into the world and they have no training. But Captain America has training, and Iron Man has, well, enough money to be trained.
Well, and ultimately that's what I always really liked about X-Men, was that it wasn't entirely black and white a lot of the time, where it wasn't just that all humans hate mutants because they don't understand them. There are certainly a lot of humans that are sympathetic toward the plight of mutants, but they're still afraid of them because they don't necessarily know what they're doing. And you've got people like early Cyclops who can't stop himself from blowing stuff up with his eyeballs just because he doesn't have the right apparatus on his face.
There was a story that what's his name? I almost said Mr. Fantastic. That Professor Xavier sent Wolverine out to some cave somewhere to essentially say hi to this kid, give him a beer, and then kill him. Because this kid's mutant power was he couldn't be within like a mile of another person, otherwise they just disintegrate. He killed an entire town and then ran out into the middle of nowhere And because Wolverine has this healing ability, it was able to counteract this growing decay. And so Wolverine gave the kid something, that only an adult should have, or at least, as we see it in society, that only adults should have. And then killed him. Said, "You can't exist because you cannot exist with other people."
Yeah.
And where am I going with this? It's
a force of nature thing.
Yeah, I think where I'm going with this is that regular humans have a right to be afraid of mutants, but that doesn't necessarily mean that. Because it does come into a tolerance issue, because mutants do actually have danger attached to them, but it's something that they cannot control. So why hate them? Still, that doesn't change the fact that superheroes are incredibly dangerous if they're not trained. I mean, that was even an issue of. Right before they did this whole ultimate death of Spider-Man, which is annoying to me that they chose to do it now, because they were starting a big story arc, and then it just kind of petered into this. But they started it with Ultimate Spider-Man going to be trained in issue 150, right before they picked up on Ultimate Death. They had Spider-Man
Death,
Ultimate Death, as opposed to regular death, which happened.
Right.
But Spider-Man was informed by the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Carol Danvers, that Spider-Man was going to be trained by Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America. And they even had a story, or at least an issue, where they sat down the three guys and said, "Hey, what do you think?" And Iron Man said, "I think he's good as he is." Thor said, "I don't know. I don't want to judge him." And Captain America says, "I think we need to lock him up."
Oh, wow.
And so since Captain America essentially outvoted in this, they take Iron Man's going to train him, and Iron Man says, "Hit me as hard as you can." And Spider-Man says, "You don't know what you're doing, do you?" And Iron Man says, "No, I have no idea." So, and then Captain America decides he's going to take his turn and train Spider-Man, but then all of this stuff happens, and Spider-Man gets killed in the crossfire. And to me...
Oh, and you think it would have been a lot interesting if they just kept going with that?
Yeah, I don't think they should have done this. I think it was just Marvel telling Bendis, this is what we're going to do.
Oh, that's pretty obvious.
And that's annoying to me. That's business falling into it. And
we're seeing that all across the board right now.
I'm not sure why I'm getting off on this.
That's not fair, but we're seeing that quite a bit. But yeah, this is a totally different conversation.
Yeah. So anyway, X-Men.
Final thoughts on the X-Men thing?
I think X-Men can be good, but one thing I've always sort of kind of supported is the Dark Horse way of doing things, which is you have your various storylines, and if they connect, that's a cool, fun thing to do. If they don't, then whatever. But
let me ask you this question, because I was going to say that in my final thoughts too. That I'm with you. That is better, but is it possible after we've done it this other way for so long?
No, I mean that's the thing, is that I think Marvel has essentially shot themselves in the foot and are just doomed to having an imperfect product.
Yeah, where they just have to do this for no other reason than it's how they've always done it, or it's how they've done it for so long that you start having to retcon things. You start having to go DC and retcon things.
Yeah, I mean unless
Marvel's never going to be prepared to retcon things. Well, I'm sorry, that's a dumb thing to say. Marvel has retcon things. I don't think they're ever going to be prepared to do a Crisis style retcon.
With how much flack DC catches for doing that, I think.
But I think Marvel would catch more because they've never done it. I mean, they've never done that broad of a retcon kind of thing. You've got stories from all the way back to the very beginning when they first started putting the name Marvel on their books that they can still invoke at any time. I mean, I read a Spider-Man comic a couple weeks ago that mentioned something that happened way back in a mid-'60s issue. DC can't do that. They can bring characters back like that, but they can't necessarily invoke those same the stories that happened that long ago because of the whole Crisis thing. And it's kind of amusing too, because we're at this point now where if you say pre or post Crisis, you actually have to now specify.
Yeah, which Crisis?
Which one? Yeah.
You know, the one where the guy died? Oh, that one.
Oh,
gotcha.
Oh yeah. Well, Vince, anything else you want to add? I think I'm good.
No, it's a difficult thing to it's a difficult thing to say. I think X-Men have a right to exist, but I think that it would
I think mutants have a right to exist. We're trying really hard not to be prejudiced against mutants, but we can't stand those people. I've actually got a Sentinel in my car. I just ride a Sentinel every day when I go to the grocery store, whatever.
It keeps them away from me. We mind our own business. Every so often, my Sentinel goes off and tries to kill people, but I say, hey, stop.
Yeah, I mean, I program it for milk, but it reads Jubilee, and it's just all this whole thing.
And sometimes it'll kill all the milk.
Target the mutant. Target every milk. Vince, do you have a rant for us?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
There is I like referential humor. I like it when people reference things that I've heard of. But it annoys me when people treat the things that they're referencing as if it's so common knowledge that, why don't you get this? Well, because nobody's seen the fourth episode of the anime that only came out in a particular town of that, of that country. That country, also known as Japan.
So, I thought you were going to say Liberia.
Yeah. But I get annoyed when I'm sitting there in a group of people and somebody makes this incredibly pretentious joke like, surely you've heard of Meatloaf's this and that. I like Meatloaf. I haven't listened to all of his albums. So making a joke about one song that was like a B-side, what makes people think that this makes them clever? Just because you've heard of something? Here's the deal. Humor is essentially trying to reach common ground with other people. And if you are talking to a particular audience, that's fine. But if you are talking to a general audience, don't turn your nose up at me because I haven't seen this incredibly random thing. It annoys me. It really, really annoys me. Like, I'll go into a comic book store and I find these people all over the place. Oh, you didn't read issue 154? No, I didn't. You know why? Because I have a life.
Yeah, sure. Well, and plus, like, what's the point of comedy if it's only funny to you? I mean, like, why use comedy to, you talk down to people like that and be like, no, this is really funny, but you're just an idiot for not knowing it.
I was talking to a person at one point.
Although I think to a certain degree we're all somewhat guilty of that at one point or another when we know we have a really, really funny joke and we just wish the other person had seen the thing we'd seen.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, it's like I would say it's about attitude. You know what I mean? I mean, like, it certainly makes sense to be frustrated to a degree, but not to take it out on a person or to actually be mad at them because they didn't know something.
I was at one point I was trying to get something on stage, and the guy that I was working with, he said, or I asked him why he made this particular choice for what we were doing on stage, and the guy said, doing on stage meaning a play, and the guy said, well, it's an incredibly personal thing that I don't feel like sharing. I'm like, you do realize that we're creating something for public consumption, and they didn't go through the emotional thing that you went through, so choosing that for this means nothing to them. And it's essentially the same thing. People are like, my personal thing is important, and if you don't know, then, that's your tough luck, and it's your fault.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, write poetry for only you to read. I mean...
Yeah, keep a diary.
Or whatever.
Or a journal, if you feel like being manly about your diary.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, comedy and drama and things like that, all to a certain degree come out of personal experience, but to make it accessible, you have to turn it into something else in a way.
Yeah. Well, anyway... That's enough of me being on my high horse talking about pretentious people.
That's a great rant, though.
I'll be honest, I find this when I go to like large concentrated groups of specifically geeks, but even more specifically anime geeks that I happen to, like, I'll sit there and they'll say a joke to me and they'll think it's hilarious and I'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about. And they'll say, oh, you haven't seen this? Like, no, I haven't seen Hitalia Axis Powers. I know you love it, but I don't care.
Yeah, sure. And for the record, if we ever say something on the show that nobody else gets, that probably just means that you're less insane than us.
Yeah, you know, when I'm sitting in a room and I make a joke that's a reference to something and then nobody gets it, and I'm like, man, I'm a geek. I can't believe I just made that joke.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just really love your point, Vince, because when that happens, you're the one that has to adjust what you're doing.
Yeah, you gotta know your audience.
You know, and when that doesn't work, that's on you. That's the point to then go to a different place, not to sit there and go, well, God, you people, how dare you not know everything I know in my brain?
Yeah.
Man, I wish we'd done a whole podcast on that.
Seems like we coulda.
Wow. Okay. Well, are you done?
Yeah, I think I'm done.
Okay. Man, I wish we were just talking about that now, because I'm with you. I wasn't even with you when whatever fueled this happened, and I'm angry now. I'm going to talk about something that's super, super geeky and is about as far away from what you were just talking about as I could possibly get. I'm going to talk a little bit about toy merchandising and specifically toy pricing. This is a very specific thing that I'm going to complain about that happened today to me, but I think it's really amusing, and I thought I'd bring it up. And maybe there's a greater point here. I don't even know. I went to Target today and I bought my kid. Jason's like a year and a half.
Kid?
No, listen to me. Jason's like a year and a half now old, and I've been buying him some of the Imaginext toys, some of the DC toys. So he's got the big Batmobile with the Batman. I got him that for Christmas, and so today my mom and I were out with him, and she decided to get him another thing for that, and it was. We were looking at these things, and they had a little Riddler guy with, I mean, I want to say figure, but they're barely, action figures. I mean, toy versus action figure. They're very, very much intended to be played with, of course, because they're for little kids. And it's a Riddler with a Riddler van with like this, well, more of a truck really, and then there was another package that had the exact same product, duplicate thing, the Riddler with the truck, with the big green truck with a question mark on top. But it also came with a Two-Face and a motorcycle, what looks like a Two-Face motorcycle. And both packages were the same price.
Huh.
One was just the Riddler with the truck, the other thing had two extra things with it. It was in almost twice the amount of stuff you get it, and they both cost the same. And we didn't buy it. So we didn't believe that there was any way they cost the same. So we took the one with the Two-Face in it, and we went and we scanned it, and lo and behold, both of these things cost $13. That's weird.
Well, it's just because they know that Two-Face is more awesome than Riddler, so they're trying to sell Riddler with him.
Isn't that odd, though? I just don't even know how that happens. I mean, like, what I'm trying to decide is the Two-Face one a really good deal, or is the Riddler one without the Two-Face a ripoff? That's what I can't decide.
I don't know. You got a good point. I mean, I always tend to diminish what they're like. I don't trust the people that are doing this, so I'll say, well, this is obviously a ripoff. They can produce this at a lesser price, so if they're willing to give away that thing, they're obviously making their money back anyway. So this one's a ripoff.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's kind of strange, because if it's like they just put that together in case somebody didn't want the Two-Face, then make it a couple dollars cheaper. That's all I'm saying. This is a very, very small rant, but I just thought it was strange. The other thing that's really weird about this figure, I guess I'm sort of reviewing this thing all at the same time, is that the Two-Face comes with this motorcycle that's one color on one side and one color on the other. So it's obviously meant to be Two-Face's motorcycle. The wheels have bat symbols on them.
Oh, wow.
So it's very obvious that they took a Batman motorcycle they'd made for this thing, recolored it, and didn't change the wheels.
That's ridiculous.
And went, well, it's for 4 or 5-year-olds. They won't know the difference.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and that's obviously their logic is, who cares? They're kids.
Well, I care. I think it's weird that Two-Face is riding around with bat symbols on his wheels. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
All right. No, I agree. It's becoming more that toys are just ridiculously overpriced anyway, so.
Oh yeah, that's totally true.
Like I'll go to the store and I'll look in the toy aisle and they'll have a 3-inch figure for $10 or $12, and I say to myself, why?
Yeah, well, and I mean, like, I just don't buy figures like I used to. I mean, they're twice or three times what they were when we were kids. And I mean, a lot of them are better made, so it kind of makes sense that some of those are more expensive. But the ones that aren't still cost more, and I just don't understand that. But anyway, that may be another conversation for another time. Thanks a lot for listening to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast, and we'll talk to you once again next week. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Vince.